Hello, Horror Fanatics. I'm Frank.
And I'm Jen, and we welcome you to our weekly podcast,
The Horror! Thank you for joining us as we dive deep into all things horror, supernatural, scary, and downright creepy.
If you like what you hear, rate, review, and subscribe or follow to add us to your regular rotation of podcasts.
You can also submit any ideas, comments, and suggestions to our email address at oth@seriouslydecent.com. And you can check out our website at ohthehorrorpodcast.com. Catch our whole back catalog, seasons 1 and 2, catch up on 3.
Yep.
Connect to social media, check our bios.
Do things, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, social media, quick thing.
Yes.
Because we got some new members in the group, and thank you for hopping aboard.
Hello.
Welcome aboard. And
how are you? Keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times.
And we can, we embrace the chatter and all that stuff. We approve all the comments that come through. So if there's comments and you're like, hey, I didn't see it come up right away, I might delete it. We just got to review it.
Right.
And the reason we have to review it is because of this. There's a lot of self-promotion on the Facebook group.
And spam.
Yeah.
Yep,
but
I'd have to say
spam is self-promotion in this case.
Yeah.
And I say self-promotion because you didn't ask for permission to promote yourself.
Right.
And that's our ask.
Yeah.
We have no problem promoting you.
Right.
But please submit it into the archaic form of email at oth@seriouslydecent.com. If you do not go through email, we're deleting it every single time. That's it.
Yep.
It's so I know a lot of it is bots.
Yeah.
I know a lot of it is that type of stuff, but I don't want to turn people off from the group either.
Right, yeah.
You know, if you're in a like-minded space and you're in this kind of same genre of podcasts and you'd like to do a collab or you'd like to promote something, we'll definitely check you out.
Yeah.
But the fact is we'd like to do it.
Give us a chance to check you out before
we'd like to check you out,
and
and we'd like to do it in a more formal process.
Yeah.
Because, if we would like to have a relationship with you, we would like to have a relationship, something that's long and enduring.
Yeah.
And not just a one-and-done thing.
Before we suggest something to our fanatics,
no, because we get stuff.
Check it out.
We get stuff a lot of time, and this is stuff you don't even see, Jen. You know, like I'll get a lot of emails, and it's people that'll do like email or movie trailers, movie stuff like that. And we're not really like a movie podcast.
No, we're not.
So unfortunately, I do ditch a lot of those, and maybe that's opportunities we could branch out to other groups, but it just don't. We made a decision a long time ago that we don't want to be a movie podcast.
Yeah.
However, we may get into the thing where we'll say, hey, there's this independent film, you could check this out, and just kind of blurb it out that way. Because we have a wide reach.
We do.
And I get, we got
some pretty amazing people.
Well, yeah, but we started from nothing too.
Yeah.
And so I respect that. But I also want to keep what we have with care. And that's all I know is it takes one bad apple to ruin a whole entire bunch. And I don't want that kind of stigma.
No.
So, yes, for those that have a podcast or a board game, because we've gotten those too.
Yes.
Check out our board game and all that stuff. And this is a part-time thing for us, so we don't have that kind of full-time ability to look at things.
Right.
So that's furthermore, if you could just send through email and just really kind of wow us with your email saying, hey, check me out, blah, 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 or I'd like to do a collab, or I'd like to do this and that. And with Halloween coming up, we're definitely embracing the idea of stuff like that. But yeah, just to go on our Facebook
we're
group.
Torturing ourselves.
But just to go on a Facebook group and throw a comment of, hey, check my podcast out.
Yeah.
Or check this out.
That's going to be declined every time.
We're going to decline it every single time. So
unless you've gone through email first.
Yeah, you go through email, and then we'll create some sort of post for you.
Correct.
And you could get a full post instead of a chintzy comment.
Yeah.
Off of stuff we have. Yeah. For the most part.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of it, I look at it. It's bots and things like that. But we like to stay very organic here. Organic relationships, organic posts, organic content, all that stuff. So that was one thing I wanted to address. The second thing, it's been the reoccurring theme, but it'll keep going for at least 4 weeks. We are doing the
Hot Wing Challenge.
The Hot Wing Challenge. That's going to be our Halloween episode, and it's going to be in video and audio.
We got a videotape.
Yeah. And so in that respect, if you have some questions that you'd like us to answer as far as cult themes, lore themes, any kind of things like that, or just like what we think about this, what we think about that, again, organically send to email at oth@seriouslydecent.com, or that we will permit as a post.
Yeah.
On the Facebook group. That's again organic material that's part of the theme of the show. So we're looking forward to that. We've got the hot sauce packet picked.
Yep.
We're gonna order it within the next week or two, and we'll start drumming that up of what kind of sauces we got and how we're all the Scoville units and all that stuff. And for the Halloween episode, whenever that falls, I don't have the exact date on it. We're gonna do that. I was even thinking maybe we could even put it in like an episode. Like we'll actually try to do an episode while
with
doing
like
that.
us answering the questions.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
So in between questions,
we should drop
through
the audio for the podcast episode with us going through the questions, and then we'll have the video up.
I figure we're just going to do it all at once because it's a test thing for video. So the video might not work out, and I don't want to ruin it all completely. But yeah, and if you're just hopping in for the first time, or if you're hopping in from a lapse of listening to us, we are considering video next year.
Yes.
And that's this is one of the things we could do to test out video and see how it kind of pans out for us on the editing end and the content creation end and all that stuff. But the video, we're definitely going to do, I want to do it to where it's a free platform. I don't want to charge for it, and I don't want to pay for it either.
Right.
So that limits us to some of the options. Obviously, YouTube's one of them. We're going to check a few others. I'm not really biased towards anything.
Right.
It's more availability and what people go on. So, that's the other thing to address. And I think that's it.
Oh my God, did we just do like businessy stuff?
Well, yeah, here's the thing. They say this in podcasting. If you want something for listeners to do, you have to say it 7 times in 7 different episodes. You got it.
Fair enough.
You have to say it 7 times for it to
right.
be reached in. So we're what, two down,
2 down,
3-ish. So that's
5 to go.
That's what I'm saying. We're going to pump this all through to the middle of September and late September through there. And then, of course, October, we're going to blast it through. But yeah, so that's all of the, what do they call it?
Stuff.
Yeah, there's a fancy word. It's a $30 word for all that stuff I just said there.
I like stuff.
It's not addendums, but, I forget.
Got some addendums and provisos.
Provisos.
Let's put a pin in that, and we'll come back to it.
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that for next week, where we'll bother you again with it. So here we are, season 3.
Back to some good old-fashioned murder.
Episode 140.
Yep.
And actually, this is an interesting kind of murder story because it's questionable.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And there's some cool history wrapped into this as well.
Yeah.
Stuff that people haven't really, you might hear some things that you've never heard before.
Right.
That was very common a long time ago. And it just shows you how much the world has changed.
It's changed, man.
It really is, yeah. And so I'm very excited to talk about this. So episode 140, Minnie Dean.
Yep.
Not Minnie Dean, Minnie creative director Dean.
No.
Not that.
And if we're honest, he really wasn't Minnie for very long.
His paws were never Minnie.
No. He had maxi paws right from the start.
He had big foots.
He did have big foots.
Big feet. Yeah. Which he's here.
And you're not allowed to touch him.
And he's here sleeping in peace because we've been gone all day.
Yeah.
We had a great day at the park, though.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I'm glad. He really needed to
I was sitting there
have
and
fun.
I talked to Mom. I caught up with her a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But then I was sitting there thinking, I was like, it's been a long time since we've been at that park.
It's been
like
a
2
year.
years.
I was going to say it's at least over a year.
So it was amazing. Like I drop him off and he gets right to the pole where the gate is.
Yeah.
And he's sniffing that for at least 15 minutes straight.
I'm sure.
Which that's like hardcore sniffing right there.
Yeah.
That's huffing.
Yep.
And so then I'm thinking, all right, we're gonna ramble up the path there. He gets right to the pavilion and just sniff-a-rama. He's sniffing the table.
Yep.
He's sniffing all that. And then he was gonna go into the pavilion. I'm like, buddy, we got a ways to go. Do you want to burn it all out here? And he's just like, oh, no. And he runs up, gets to literally like 15, 20 more feet, nose to the ground again.
Yep.
And then he was good by the time we got up to like the gazebo. And then he was just like, yeah, this is old business. Blah, 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 blah.
I know this place.
You know, yeah. Nothing's changed here, man. Everything's the same. Everything's the same spot. Maybe some new smells, but nothing too crazy.
Nope.
Yeah. But yeah, we get in the car and he's just like, yeah. Just a sniffer.
For
like,
those of you that
overload.
have dogs and you're one of those just take them for multiple walks, if you really want to gas out your dog, let them smell.
Yeah.
Let them smell because that works them out more than
It's crazy.
a 3-mile walk.
I remember I was so ignorant to the idea, and I remember when like Dean was younger, and I can't remember where I read it. It was online somewhere, and they were saying, yeah, when you walk your dog, you let them sniff everywhere, even if it takes 10 minutes. And you'd have a lot of people there who are like, well, no, I'm trying to burn you out, and they look at it from exercise.
Right.
But the way they said it is if your dog did 10 to 15 minutes of intense like
heavy
sniffing.
Yeah.
It's the equivalent of 30 to 40 minutes of just walking.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you supremely dislike walking your dog, which I got to ask yourself, why do you have a dog?
Right. Yeah.
But let's just get past that. Let them sniff. Let them smell. And it'll wear
let
them.
them smell, man.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's crazy. So back to Minnie Dean.
How about her?
The sources I have is nzhistory.gov.
Same.
Which New Zealand. This story takes place in New Zealand. Or took place in New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's not taking place.
No. It done did already happen.
That ship has sailed. Library.shop in New Zealand. And then Papers Past. It's the National Library in New Zealand.
I also have...
Or should I say New Zealand? Or how do they say it different? Yeah, now I'm acting totally American.
Yeah. No. How about we let that
How
ship
about we
sail
let that
too?
ship sail too?
Yeah.
Ahoy.
Ahoy, hoy. So I too have nzhistory.gov and rnz.com, or I'm sorry, rnz.co.nz. And
yeah, those great government addresses.
I know, right?
They're so smooth and roll right off the tongue.
It really does.
Yeah.
So when I initially went to NZ History, baby farmers was the topic.
Yeah.
And that's where Minnie Dean got her nickname, the baby farmer.
Yeah.
So what I did was I backtracked into, all right, so what do they consider a baby farmer?
What in the heck is a baby farmer?
Here we go.
Yeah.
So before organized creches or daycare centers, single mothers, and some married women too, paid other people to look after their children. You know, kind of like a babysitter or a nanny type thing.
Some also adopted.
Correct.
Like it was a drop-off.
Yep.
deal.
This could be a temporary arrangement while a woman was out at work, or it could end up being permanent as women simply paid others to take their children off their hands. It was a form of unofficial adoption. The practice came under intense public scrutiny in the late 19th century. High-profile British and Australian court cases in the 1880s introduced New Zealanders to the sinister practices of baby farmers, aka paid caregivers who neglected children in their care, concealed their deaths, or deliberately murdered the infants.
And so, just to kind of put it in perspective, this is late Victorian Britain and less commonly in Australia and United States. It happened, but this was a real kind of late Victorian Britain thing.
Right.
And Australia got into it a teeny bit.
Right.
Again, the States a teeny bit, but just to kind of put it in perspective.
And again, we're in New Zealand.
Yeah.
New Zealand newspapers soon reported suspected cases of baby farming. There was usually more smoke than fire. An 1889 police survey in Christchurch revealed more honest caregivers than baby farmers. Interest was aroused, though, and New Zealanders began to discover baby farmers in their midst. Quote, I have no hesitation in saying that the evil of baby farming exists in this colony to a large extent, end quote, reported Arthur Hume, the commissioner of police in 1893. He claimed to know of 20 baby farmers in Christchurch alone.
Mm-hmm.
In an attempt to stamp out this fearful slaughter of the innocents, the state regulated the system of paid child care. Under the Infant Life Protection Act, passed in 1893, all homes that received payment, for looking after infants under the age of 2 for more than 3 consecutive days had to be licensed as foster homes and were subject to police inspection. 3 years later, the system was tightened further in response to one of the most dramatic criminal trials in New Zealand history, which brings us to Minnie Dean, and she is ranked as one of New Zealand's most infamous figures.
Yeah.
And she's the first and only woman to be judicially executed in their history.
Yeah, and it's safe to say that probably ever, because they've abolished executions there. So that might be a title that she's going to hold forever. You know, I mean, unless they reverse it around. But yeah, she was the only woman and probably will ever be the only woman that was executed in New Zealand.
So for years, she was portrayed as a cold-blooded killer who murdered babies for cash.
Well, executed for capital punishment. I just wanted to get that
More recently, though, as people have done more investigating, the attitudes toward her has shifted a little bit, but she's still a very complex and controversial figure. Minnie arrived in Invercargill on a ship from Tasmania in the early 1860s. No one knows exactly which year or her age, but she would have been in her late teens or early 20s. She told people she was the widow of an Australian doctor and the daughter of a Presbyterian minister back home in Scotland. That story wasn't true. But as historian Barbara Brooks explained, it was pretty common for new immigrants to lie about their backgrounds. Quote, that's one of the big attractions of migration. People could reinvent themselves, end quote. And Minnie had more reasons than most to want to reinvent herself. She arrived in Invercargill with a young daughter and was pregnant with a second. Lindley Hood, author of Minnie Dean, Her Life and Crimes, found Tasmanian birth records for Minnie's eldest daughter signed with her maiden name, Wilhelmina McCulloch. That suggests that both Minnie's daughters, Ellen and Isabella, were illegitimate. She was only 16 years old, this is a quote, and she'd gone to Tasmania by herself, Lindley Hood said. Maybe she was pregnant and had been sent off to the colonies because she was bringing the family to shame, which is one of the options. And of course, illegitimacy wasn't uncommon in the 19th century, but it came with a heavy social stigma. Unwed mothers struggled to find jobs or husbands or any kind of normal social life. Minnie's white lie about a dead husband let her dodge a lot of those social issues, baggage, innuendos.
Yeah.
She probably had some help in pulling off this story. Minnie had a famous aunt in New Zealand. She's best known as Granny Kelly, and she's a founding settler of Invercargill. Quote, her aunt would have known the truth, said Lindley Hood. It must have been Granny Kelly who really put her arms around Minnie and supported her and helped spread the story that she was the widow of a doctor and the daughter of a clergyman, end quote. So Here's Minnie with this tricky start to her life, but she spent the next 8 years making the most of her second chance. She became a governess and married a local farmer called Charles Dean. They set up a pub near Riverton on the road to Otago Goldfields, and the pair stood to make a pile of cash from thirsty miners off to seek their fortune. Minnie's daughters, Ellen and Isabel, got married and left home. The couple adopted 2 more girls, Margaret and Esther. And that's when everything starts to go wrong. In the 1870s, a railway line was built bypassing the Dean's pub. Customers dried up, and to make matters worse, New Zealand was in the midst of a long depression. The bank foreclosed on the mortgage Charles Dean had taken out to buy the pub, and he was declared bankrupt. Minnie and Charles fell back on Granny Kelly, who gave them enough money to buy a house and farm at a place called the Larches, just outside of Winton. They stocked the land with cattle and planted a small orchard, and that's when disaster hits for a second time. Quote, "The larches burned to the ground," said Lindley Hood, and a man who they owed money to came along and took away all the fruit trees, end quote. Minnie and Charles scraped together enough money to rebuild, but their new home wasn't much better than a hovel. Then the Deans were hit by a third tragedy. Quote, "They found one of her daughters with her 2 small children. I think they were about 10 months and 2 years. They were all found drowned in a well," end quote. It seems almost certain the deaths were a murder-suicide, but officially they were recorded as unexplained. Lindley Hood thinks that's probably because the community wanted to make sure Ellen got a Christian burial, which wouldn't have been possible if her death was ruled a suicide. So now we have Minnie Dean in the 1880s, recently bereaved, destitute, living in a hovel in Winton with 2 adopted daughters and no real source of income. Quote, "Charles was bankrupt, which made it difficult for him to find a job of any description," Lindley Hood said. "So Minnie began taking unwanted babies," end quote. There's no easy description for what Minnie Dean was doing in modern terms. Maybe you'd call it a one-woman orphanage or a long-term child care service. But in Minnie's day, people had another term for what she was doing, and that's baby farming. And right at this point in the story, New Zealand's newspapers were full of stories from the UK and Australia about baby farmers, and by gosh, by golly, they actually included them.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Waters, the Brixton baby farmer, has been sentenced to death and executed. Wellington, Independent, December 3rd, 1870. A baby farmer named Augusta Grammage was lately sentenced to 10 years penal servitude for feloniously slaying a young child that had been entrusted to her care. Nelson Evening Mail, January 21st, 1875. Hundreds of people gathered in the street, lined the fences, and crowded even the housetops to watch the police at work. The 2 bodies found today bring the total up to 15 unearthed so far. Bay of Plenty Times, November 30th, 1892. The bodies of 3 infants have been unearthed at Brunswick, a suburb of Melbourne. The police believe they are on track of an extensive system of baby farming. New Zealand Mail, September 8th, 1893. And in 1895, New Zealand had its own baby farming headlines. And then we're going to get into Miss Minnie. So in 1895, Southland's Wilhelmina Minnie Dean became the first and only woman to be hanged in New Zealand. Her story exposed the stark realities of paid childcare and the lack of choice that many women faced during this period. Dean had looked after children for a fee since the late 1880s at her rural Winton home, the Larches. At any one time, there could be up to 9 children under the age of 3 in her care. In an era of high infant mortality, it was perhaps inevitable that some of the children would fall ill and die, especially if they were disadvantaged to begin with and lived in cramped conditions. In defense of Minnie Dean, a 6-month-old infant died in 1889, and 2 years later, a 6-week-old baby died of inflammation of the heart valves and congestion of the lungs. The inquest concluded that the dead infant and other children at the Larches were well cared for, but that the premises were actually inadequate. Dean was already under police investigation by then. Police had found that she had been looking for more children to take into her care and that she had tried unsuccessfully to take out life insurance policies on some of the infants. The death of the baby brought closer surveillance, and in 1892, Christchurch police took charge of a 3-week-old child that Dean had adopted from its single mother for 25 pounds. Police traced Dean to a boarding house and found the child in very dirty clothes, being fed from a bottle containing sour and curdled milk. The baby's mother said that she could scarcely recognize her child as it had, quote, so altered for the worse in the 2 days that Dean had looked after it. The police thought that they had probably saved the baby's life. They remained suspicious and kept Dean under surveillance. And in 1893, the commissioner of police wrote to the minister of justice with renewed concerns about Dean's activities. And now we get to the actual event that caused all of this.
You know, it's crazy because you briefly mentioned it a bit, but like the infant mortality at that time was unbelievable. You know, and I think this is something that like people are so disconnected from.
Yeah.
Like they have no idea
I'd have
truly
to say
what the actual things that were at stake then.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
I was reading some stuff where they were saying that it was basically estimated to run that about 80 to 100 infants out of 1,000 colonial births were going to they died.
They would die.
You know,
yeah.
That's 10%.
Well, and here's the thing. I mean, there was a period of time where when a woman found out she was pregnant, instead of there being great rejoice.
Yeah, no, it was a serious situation.
Because if the mother survived, then, okay, did the baby. If the baby survives the birth, all right, well, now the next hurdle is, does the baby make it to a year?
Yeah.
And then it was, okay, we've made it to a year. Can we make it to 2? And I don't think they ever truly stopped worrying whether or not a kid or a child, a toddler, would die until they made it to
school.
13, 14, and they're all right, you might make it now.
The way I looked at it was usually the breath of fresh air would kind of come around at age 5 and 6, you know, and that was, you know, okay, I think we're in the clear with all that.
Right.
But I mean, just snap right out of the gate.
Yeah.
80 to 100 infants out of 1,000.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, that doesn't even cover the figure of the first year.
Yeah.
You know, so what do you add another, say out of 1,000 births, you got 100 that die immediately. You probably got another 100 that'll die in age 1 to 2.
Yeah.
You know, so now you're looking at basically what they normally say, 25 to 30% of the births ended up in some sort of death.
And you think about it, at that time, scarlet fever. If scarlet fever came through, that would wipe out probably all of your children.
Yeah, yeah.
You know? And then, heaven forbid, if they get exposed to measles or mumps. So, even school-age children. Yeah, I mean, everything is fine until it's not. All it takes is some sort of epidemic to make its way through. And this is before the age of even really good medicine, let alone inoculation.
Well, and if you go back early enough, it was crazy because this gets us back to what we were talking about, history of vampires and stuff like that, where, you know, people didn't even really know. And I mean, I'm going way back now, but the fact is they didn't even really fully understand how diseases travel.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, so this is
until germ theory, they were like, I don't know, man, you got ghosts in your blood.
Yeah, you know, or this person's a vampire because they're spitting up blood or whatever, you know, and just
let's drill a hole in your head so the bad spirits can leave.
Well, you know, you can joke about the drilling of the head, but that still is done to release pressure, you know, from trauma to the brain and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I mean,
and TBI, they'll remove a portion of the skull.
Oh, yeah. I've met a few people that have you can see the plate or they have the dent. You know, and all that. And, you know, that's a total giveaway of somebody that had brain trauma that got that removed. So you do look at stuff like that, and you look at how far ahead of its time it really was, and nothing was very sanitary, and they were doing those types of things. I mean, in one hand, you can look at how exceptional that is, but you can also look at it, other reasons for things. And
right. Well, I mean, here's a surgeon, a doctor, going from removing a gangrenous limb from one patient, not washing their hands, and then going and delivering a baby. And then they're like, geez, we can't figure out why all these people are dying and these babies aren't making it. I don't know. Maybe it's the shit you got all over your hands.
Well, and here's the thing, though, is even cleaning then, like, they didn't have antibacterial stuff. So
no.
I'm going to say they cleaned. I know I hear stories of things where they didn't clean and all that stuff, but people even back then had a general sense of staying clean. Did they do it often? No. Could they do it often? No. But there was this general sense of, oh, I should probably just not. I'm in a hotel now, or I'm in a, I'm here or there, and I'm gonna bathe, or I'm near the stream, I'm gonna bathe. But that's what people have to understand is, you could wash your hands with a bar of soap. What the fuck was that then?
Yeah.
I mean, just what people are making bars of soap with now. But they didn't have any of the antibacterial agents and all that type of stuff.
Ash and lye.
Yeah. With maybe some lavender in it,
I don't even think they'd do that.
Yeah.
They'd be like, here's my soap.
Yeah, but hot water and, that basic type of stuff, that was being clean then. And
so, I have this, like, morbid fascination with, like, this weird type of shit.
Yeah.
So I was reading, and it was, I don't remember whether it was a university, like a research group from a university, or whether it was a research group, like, independent. And they had, like, this grant, and they were interested in effects on the body after death. Kind of to apply to, like, like the body farm situation, like what happens to your body, or, say you're exposed to something weird, or radiation or whatever, how does that impact your body, say several years down the line?
Yeah.
And they ended up doing an exhumation, and I think it was in a cemetery in Pennsylvania somewhere, like a remote, it was in there was a specific section of the cemetery. All of these people were from this one particular place, and there had been one particular event that happened, and they were curious as to, what that event would have had on these bodies. So they exhumed a couple of them, and what they discovered was that those that had the really high adipose content, that essentially their remains were soap. Like they had soapified. The adipose had reacted.
Yeah.
So in their, I don't want to call it, like, decomposition, but essentially it was in their decomposition that because of this high adipose content, that it ended up turning the flesh and the body itself into soap.
Wow.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Could you imagine?
Yeah, I can.
Like, say your loved one is buried and you've gone through the grieving process, and say it's like 15, 20 years down the road, and all of a sudden they realize, there may have been some sort of heinous thing that happened.
Yeah.
Like, maybe this wasn't just an accident, maybe this was a homicide.
Something sinister.
Yeah. So let's exhume the loved one. And so here you are, you make this really heavy decision, and you're like, okay, let's exhume her. Let's check this out. And you bring the body out, and then they're like, we can't test anything because it's all soap now. Could you imagine?
Your
I'd be
Mima-
like, wait, what?
Your Mima is a bar of Irish Spring.
Yeah.
It's
your Mima is now ivory.
Yeah.
I'd be like, what?
I think it's just further sense to know, like, just when you think you got things figured out, you don't.
Yeah. I was
you
so fascinated by that because, I mean, when you think about it, like, that is how they made soap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
Yeah. But then you're like, where'd they get the lye? And it's possible.
Well, it's possible they could have put it
that
in
it could have been from the event that they all.
Yeah, the event, or they could have put lye in the grave.
They could have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are, those are those things you'll just never know. But yeah, I'm at this point in my life, I'm not surprised by anything anymore. No, it's just a general rule.
There was a part of me that was like, all right, I know now when they bury a body, especially if the cemetery is anywhere near like a municipal water supply, that you can't just put the casket in the ground. It has to be in
those
a burial vault,
vaults,
a concrete burial vault. And there are varying versions. Like you can get your basic run-of-the-mill burial vault, which is just the concrete,
the entry model.
Yeah, but it will still degrade over time.
Well, concrete breaks apart.
Right. But they also have the Cadillac of the concrete burial vault.
Well, of course.
That's plastic lined.
Mm-hmm.
And it's plastic lined not only on the inside, but on the inside of the top of it. So that essentially when you seal that, it creates an airtight seal.
You're sealed for freshness.
You're zip-locked.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Or burped Tupperware. But I just think back to all those years where it was literally a wooden
box.
Wooden box in the ground, and it's still that way in the Jewish cemeteries. And then I was thinking back to this event where they were like, at least two of the bodies were soapified.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't know why they don't just do the box. Like everybody can sit there and talk about, what's best for the environment or what's best for whatever. But it's like, there's deer that just die in the woods.
Yeah.
And all's right in the world.
Yeah.
There's bear that just die in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
All's right in the world.
Yeah.
You got that homeless guy that goes out in a field, just dies, and 5 years later, he's gone.
Yep.
Because it's just nature being nature.
Correct.
I don't see where that's a problem.
No.
Now, is there a question of and this is something I'm just not educated on, but all the stuff that they, inject like embalming and all that stuff like this that have some sort of adverse effect or something
I'm sure
like that,
it would have to. Like, because if you just left.
But how much embalming fluid's in a body,
Well, I mean there is the formaldehyde. That is part of it.
Yeah. But I mean, how much? Is it even.
They completely drain you.
Yeah.
And then they recirculate for what goes out.
All
they
right.
inject.
So is that just blood or bodily fluids?
They take out the blood and bodily fluids together, and then they refill with the embalming fluid.
Mm.
So they recirculate the embalming fluid through as a quote-unquote replacement. At least that's how it was explained to me.
Years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That's I'm doing a quick kind of
quick
Google
search
to see how much embalming fluid is used per body. 2% solution of formaldehyde, an irritant, volatile acid, approximately 1 pint of embalming fluid per stone weight of the body plus 1 pint. So it's 2 pints per pound, maybe?
Something like that.
Yeah. So if you're 200 pounds, be 400 pints.
It's a lot of fluid.
And then you got 400 pints. And we'll just do 400 pints into gallons. It's 60 U.S. gallons. Yeah. That is quite a bit.
That's a lot. I don't think it's that much.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
No. They have some bloated bodies. Anywho.
Anyhow, so what happened when they started getting into the thick of
it?
Thick of it here.
Picture it.
On average, an embalmer will need to use 1 gallon of embalming solution for every 50 pounds. 1 gallon for every 50 pounds.
Yeah.
So for a 200-pound person, that'd be 4 gallons.
4 gallons.
That's negligible.
Okay.
That isn't going to do anything to the ground. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Wooden boxes all around. All right.
Fun fact.
Yeah?
We
don't like fun facts here.
The Jewish caskets, they're all wood. They are not allowed to use any nails.
Yeah.
So it's all I'm
waiting to see if you
the wood joining.
Yeah.
I was like, it's wood glue
It's dovetails,
and wood. Yeah, they do the dovetail, but then
Yeah.
they also do
The pegs.
the pegs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. You know what? There's a lot of people that are like, so what happened with Minnie Dean?
Events moved quickly
Yeah.
in 1895.
They sure do.
On May 2nd, a railway guard saw Dean board a train carrying a young baby and a hat box. On the return trip, he noticed she only had the hat box, which, as railway porters later testified, was suspiciously heavy.
What's in the box?
After a fruitless search along the tracks, police unearthed from Dean's garden the recently buried bodies of 2 babies identified as Eva Hornsby and Dorothy Carter, and the skeleton of an older boy whom Dean later claimed had drowned. An inquest determined that Dorothy Carter had died of an overdose of the opiate laudanum, commonly used to calm irritable infants. Minnie Dean went on trial for Carter's murder in Invercargill on June 18th, 1895. She was defended by the renowned defense lawyer Alfred Hanlon, who later wrote that sober, home-loving folk from end to end of the country shuddered when the grim and ghastly story of Minnie's infamy was narrated by the prosecution. Imagine a being with the name and appearance of a woman boldly using a public railway train for the destruction of her helpless victims, sitting serene and unperturbed in a carriage with one tiny corpse in a tin box at her feet, and another enshrouded in a shawl and secured by traveling straps in the luggage rack at her head. Now let's get to her execution.
It's crazy.
Despite Hanlon's defense that the baby's death was accidental, on June 21st, Dean was found guilty of murder and sentenced to death. She was hanged at Invercargill Gaol on August 12th, 1895, again earning her this dubious honor of being the only woman ever executed in New Zealand. So after this becomes the stuff of legend.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
After her death, Minnie Dean became part of New Zealand folklore. Local legend even claimed that no plants would grow on her grave.
Yep.
Los Angeles-based singer-songwriter Helen Henderson, who was raised in Southland, recalled that, quote, Minnie was like the boogeyman of our town when I was a kid. If you were giving a cheek to your mom, or you were being naughty, it was like, you better watch out or I'll send you off to Minnie Dean's farm and you'll never be heard of again. Henderson captured...
The stuff that parents do to get their kids straightened out. I'll
send you
to a haunted murderer's house if you'll just shut the hell up.
I'll send you to the baby killer. So Henderson captured the macabre's fascination with the case in her song, Minnie Dean. And then they have a portion of the song. She dressed in black and she carried a hat and a hat box when early to the station she came. And on her way back, she always wore the hat, Invercargill to Winton on the 5 o'clock train. And that, my friends, is Minnie Dean.
Yeah, it's
so
pretty,
maybe don't kill babies.
It's pretty strange because I was reading old newspaper articles like when this was going on, and it was funny because actually in the beginning of the case, like the public opinion, you could see where the public opinion was like shifting really, really heavy.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
and there were reports of the different ways she killed the babies, like with a hat pin.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, there was tons of stuff. And, you know, that's where I love doing this type of stuff because you realize, like, people don't change. Like, groups of people act the same.
Yeah.
And, like, watching how, like, public opinion got swayed on this, and you could read it, like, through the newspaper articles as they were going through and how, you know, there was this attitude at one point and then the newspapers would say this or that. And then like, bang, it's just like the public opinion switched.
Yeah.
You know, and this was before they had the really heavy evidence of the train stuff and all that. And and at this point, the stigma of baby farming was really, really in a bad spot.
I mean,
they had wet nursing then. Which, like, if people aren't aware what wet nursing
they actually still have wet nursing, and that's women who are lactating and feed babies.
Yeah.
Who are not the biological mothers.
Not the biological mothers. But it was very common in these baby farming situations, you know. It's really, I find it amazing because, like I said earlier, like, you had the Victorian era, late Victorian era Britain that did most of this. This is where it came from, you know, and then it was very just subtle in Australia and in America, but Australia has this mega case, like
New Zealand,
you know, or New Zealand, sorry. And and then at that time, I think there was 4 or 5 other people, like women, that were executed for this. And yeah, it's amazing. They would give them like $10-$20, which, I mean, then that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, and that would be take care of this kid, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, it's something that occurred. And I mean, honestly, not too freaking long ago.
No.
You know, you're talking 150 years ago. And you had this practice that was going on for a while.
Yeah.
And it was definitely the rich that were doing this. You know, people didn't have that kind of money to do that kind of stuff, but there would be babies that were dropped off, and it's just people trying to deal with them, you know. And it's a really, really
it's weird,
crazy part of history. And I love doing these kinds of stories because people, I think, really need to know where the hell they came from.
Yeah, and just how bad it really was. So
and
things
how
aren't
bad
that
it can get.
Yeah.
You know, this could come back.
Yeah.
And people say, no frickin' way. It's like life gets basic enough and you get hungry enough because this is the whole thing. She was a respected person in the community.
Yeah.
She used to teach kids, and like she was respected. People liked her. And then, you know, as you explain, one series of bad luck right after another, after another, after another.
A series of unfortunate
events,
events, if
and
you
when
will.
you got your back on the wall and you got to stay alive and you got to provide and you got to make it, you know, if there's not a whole lot of structure and law around, you're going to do some things that you never thought you'd do. You know, and this is where structure and law comes into play.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like we talk about this now like it'll never, ever happen. And it probably won't. But the fact is, you know,
let's be honest, there are still children that die in foster homes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean,
it's
is
a
it baby
form
farming,
of it.
though?
A form of it. You know, I mean, you'd look at a foster home, you could say that's a baby farm to a certain degree, or an adoption center or something like that. That's baby farming. You know, and that definitely, there's a lot to be said there as far as that goes. But yeah, you get people that have bad luck like that and just bad situations, and they're just trying to do the right thing. And, you know, I think that's what I found interesting with her story is I think you had somebody that had good intentions.
Yeah.
Then really just saw the brunt side of life tossed at them. And then they figured, you know what, maybe I could do this with good intentions and get through this. And then the problem is life has these dark moments in it.
Yeah.
And, a child maybe did die.
Right.
And, what the hell am I going to do with this? Because this is how I make a living. And,
right.
And it was an accident. I know it's an accident. So I'm good with God.
Or the kid was actually legitimately sick.
Legitimately sick because we were talking earlier of that time period where infant mortality rate was very, very high.
Yeah.
So it was something that even if some child did die, they would just be like, hey, it happens. Yeah. It's part of life.
And they did. She did have 2 children die under her care.
Mm-hmm.
And when it was investigated, they were like, hey, these children are not being neglected, but the conditions that they're in is inadequate. Essentially meaning, there were too many children for the space.
Yeah, yeah.
But, she was, at least at that time, filling their needs.
Oh, definitely. Well, and that's the thing is you have these problems now.
Mm-hmm.
So, people like to sit and think that we're all past all this and we're all through that. No, it's in a different dress.
Yeah.
I think that's the worst thing we have as humans is that we put things in a different dress. Or we put things in we change the wording on things to soften it up or to,
I hate that.
No, I can't
really
stand
do.
it.
I hate the unhoused. No, these people are homeless.
Yeah.
Start letting these things have teeth.
Yeah.
Because if you just say, oh, they're unhoused, well, that means nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, that just means, they don't have a house.
The genius of that was George Carlin when he had that one bit there where he was talking about just the softening of language thing. And, the real one he had there, I mean, he had a lot of them, but, the one kind of popular one was shell shock, and then it was post-traumatic stress disorder. And, and he kind of wrapped up the bit with, if we still said they had shell shock, you wonder how much help they would have got. Because it's just a very hard, honest word of what it is,
Like, stop calling rape sexual assault.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, it just...
Because a lot of things are considered sexual assault.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, definitely.
And a lot of them aren't necessarily...
Rape.
Yeah. Intercourse.
Yeah, yeah.
So stop it.
Yeah. No, it's
you can't fix it if you're pretending like, it's not that big a deal.
But this is, again, an example, of something 150 years ago where they were doing it then. Everybody thinks this stuff is new, but people have just been doing it for a long time. And some of it, a lot of it, I think in some areas, you have a group that, like sexual assault and rape.
Yeah.
I'll hop on that for a bit and maybe piss half the listeners off. But the fact is I think the ones that are calling it sexual assault are the ones that are, quote unquote, trying to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem is they're not doing as good as they could be doing or think they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, we got to call this a new name, because the rape thing is making us look bad, and I think that works in a number of areas.
Yeah.
It's like, how many times have I heard people, all these places, the homeless just got all this help and all this stuff. It's like, then why is there so many homeless? Yep. I mean, like, obviously what you're doing is not working.
Right.
Period.
Yeah.
End of statement.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. There's been a homeless problem forever.
Yeah.
And people just make bad decisions or people just have shit luck.
Yep.
Or it's a combination of both. Mm-hmm. Some get involved with drugs and destroy their lives.
And then we decided to shut down a bunch of asylums or...
Well, yeah, I mean, the asylum thing is a touchy subject, though, too.
Yeah,
because,
I mean, were the conditions horrendous? Yeah, they were.
Yeah, they were horrendous. And science, again, the scientists that knew everything, and we're on the bleeding edge of things, and we're going to fix things and all that, that's the dark age of science right there with mental institutions.
And then you just shut all this shit down. Those
here's
people
the problem.
had to have somewhere to go.
Yeah, but there's no money in that.
I know.
And I say no money in it. I'm not saying it from a free market capitalist point. There's no money in it. No one even donates money to it.
Yeah.
And that's the real problem with that. If people were donating as much as they say they would like to do, I think maybe there could be a chance with that. But then also there's this point where I think personally humanity at this time has to really come to grips that there's a lot of people that you just can't help.
Yes.
And I think if you can't accept that, I mean, granted, you have a heart of gold thinking that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think you should try. You should spread love to people. I'm a huge endorser of the idea. But the fact remains is, I mean, you look at that show that I used to watch all the time with Interventions.
Yeah.
And
it was so sad.
If you read the stats on that, only 20 to 30% made it.
Yeah.
All the other ones rebounded back or relapsed back or went back into the life.
Mm-hmm.
That's 80%. And they went to 5-star resorts for free.
They had the best care.
Treatment that money could buy.
Yep.
And it didn't work. And that is, I think, the greatest experiment that you could see in real time.
Yes.
That show went on for 10, 15 years.
Yeah. Yep.
They've got tons of data they're sitting on. Mm-hmm. And the fact is so now you got to ask yourself a question. Okay, do you want these people homeless on the street, which is what we're doing right now, or do we pony up and have a heart and put these people in a facility? It would create jobs.
Yes.
And you just realize that this is as far as it goes with them.
Yeah, this is it.
Yeah.
This is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Unless they make some sort of major change
unless they
within
make
themselves.
a change.
Yeah.
And maybe them being in that environment.
Yeah.
they
Having
could
a
say
safe
that.
place where they can sit
But
and
now
think.
we're going to get into the real hard part, and this is free will. Who's going to volunteer to go into that? So now, how do you get somebody to get into that? You can't do it against their will.
No.
You can't do it. So you can't just round up homeless people in the street and throw them in there unless you say it's illegal to do this. And that's the problem we have right now is there's not a group of people that are saying, look, this has to be illegal. The street's not safe.
Yeah.
I don't want my kids around this. I don't want anything around.
It's not
and
safe.
It's not safe.
They're shitting out on the streets.
It's just not safe, period. You've got people that are desperate.
Yeah.
You got a whole street of them that are desperate.
Yes.
And they're desperate for that next high.
Yeah.
And if someone hasn't been around someone that's been addicted to a substance or been around that lifestyle, you have no idea that just the light switch switches off. And therein, I have to get whatever resources I can to get back to this feeling or this thing I'm chasing.
Yeah.
So that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's stealing from a store, killing somebody, and yeah, there needs to be a line drawn to just say, yeah, this isn't acceptable anymore. But not only that, but you can't put these people in jail. You can't put them in prison. Right. They don't belong in jail or prison. It's something else they need to be in.
Yes.
And this is the big question. And I think everybody just needs to say, yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
And not point fingers and say, hey, it's your fault, it's their fault. And you could do that. And you could probably be justifiable in a lot of areas. But until we come together in humanity to say, this is a problem and we need to come up with a pretty ugly solution for this.
Yeah.
It's not
like if we think the baby farming isn't happening now.
Oh yeah, you're crazy.
Yeah.
You're nuts.
Yeah.
And
guarantee it's happening.
Yeah, and people that don't think there's a homeless problem. You're nuts. You're crazy.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sorry. It's not loving what we're doing to them to let them out in the street
it's not.
and like just be a bunch of savages out in the road. There's no love there.
No.
There's no love for that.
And they're actually, like, how many times have we watched a true crime show and all of those, I don't know, what do they call them? Encampments.
Yeah.
Are, like, a predator's.
Oh, it's a predator's wet dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like happy hunting.
Yeah.
Because nobody cares.
Nobody cares about these people.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we have to start talking about the idea of institutions.
We do.
We have
to come up with
there
something.
Was a reason those institutions were up in the first place.
Correct.
And people forget that.
And they were actually doing good until they exceeded.
Until science said we're going to fix these people. That's when it all went wrong. It went wrong when all these doctors and all this other stuff said, we could fix these people. And it's like, maybe not. Yeah. And here's the thing. define fix.
Yeah.
What the hell does fix mean?
Yeah.
They don't want to have drugs anymore? Well, if you lobotomize them, they don't want to do anything anymore.
Right, yeah.
And that's the same thing with like antidepressants.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I remember I was on Zoloft. I didn't want to do a fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing. I felt nothing. And that's worse than feeling too much.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that. I was like, no, I don't want to feel like this.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be like this.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, like I said, this is where you're starting to get into the ugly treatment of people where you don't win either way.
Right.
It's a bad decision. Each decision, shit.
Right.
You know, to leave them out in the street, it's shit.
Mm-hmm.
To put them in a ward, that's shit.
Mm-hmm.
There's no kind of happy ending that's a
Right.
happy Hollywood ending or something like
Right.
that. But if you're risking the safety of everyone else
Yeah.
by doing nothing,
Yeah.
then maybe there's something else to do.
Yeah.
And the fact that we are not talking about it, the fact that we can't talk about it is the real problem.
Yes.
I mean, we can't talk about fucking anything anymore without worrying about, you know, an alphabet mafia after us or a bunch of fucking just crazy lunatics that are
Being
driven by just
or-
driven by some sort of cult instinct, either whether it's religion or whatever. You know, everybody's walking on pins and needles on what they can say and what they can't say because they don't want to get shamed and destroyed and socially destroyed and all this stuff. And I'm sorry, I just see where it's only going to get deeper and deeper if we can't have these kind of conversations.
Yeah.
And that's where I think stuff like this is really embracing of that. And that's
It's
where
important.
I think we need to talk about this type
We
of
do.
stuff. And even if you just talk about it with one friend, you'd be surprised that ripple effect it has with things. And this is something I think everyone can get behind. No one likes seeing all this homeless on the side of the road. No one likes seeing all these foster kids and just stray kids in the system,
Right.
you know, but to sit there and just say, oh, we're going to do something about it. And then these people collect the money. And this is why the homeless thing is the way it is. You've got these organizations, they're making big money.
Yeah.
You've got people that run these organizations that are making 6-figure freaking salaries and they've got all this homeless around them, you know? And so now you got to go after that. And then the problem is if you and I go after that, we're going after an organization that's funded by millions of dollars, you know, and
Going up against the machine, man.
well, it's a machine with deep pockets, you know, and that's, that stuff's all just kind of gone sideways. But, you know, this stuff, like we mentioned, it's gone, but it's not gone.
No.
You know, the
just
baby farming.
It's just
you know.
got a different package.
I mean, are they throwing dead kids off of trains and stuff like that? You know,
She didn't throw the baby from the train.
you know,
she
she threw
put it
mama from the train.
She put it in a hat box.
Yeah.
And she carried it away and buried it in her garden.
Yeah. No, it's crazy.
I mean, it's not great.
Yeah. Well, Minnie Dean, the baby farmer, that
So
wraps up.
along with not great, what do
what's
we
that?
got coming up next?
I know. I was going to say we're, you know, I think it's a nice little transition thing here that we were talking about, and it wasn't even on purpose. But yeah, starting in September, we got the Waverly Hills Sanitarium.
We do.
Yeah.
Guys, this has been on my list from the word jump.
Yeah.
When we were like, all right, we're going green. We're going to do this.
Yeah. Well, and the cool thing is we haven't done a sanitarium story.
We have
yet,
not.
you
I know.
So this
That's why
opens
I'm
up.
like, wait, what?
Yeah. This opens up like
Yep.
a whole new set of topics that we can dive into now because there's tons of sanitarium stories, massive amounts of them. And some of them are straight up off the chain fucking crazy, you know.
I have stumbled across a couple jewels that,
Oh, yeah. No, there's
I
easily-
can't wait.
There's easily 3 or 4 of these that I want to do. And it's more of, again, like, I mean, medicine was doing some crazy shit. Crazy shit. You know, and again, it's the same thing as the homeless person in the street, and you say, oh, someone could go there and kill him and no one cares. Well, that's what happened with these sanitariums and stuff like that. It's just, it's closed doors, no, out of sight, out of mind. No one knows what's going on in there. And they're all playing this Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde
shit.
fucking shit, you know. And
It's Frankenstein.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, this is where you got to sit down and say there's evil in the world.
There is.
There really is,
Yes.
And this is where, I hate to say it, but it's like you got to start really finding your moral ground that you're going to stand on, and you got to be true to it.
Yeah, you got to
And
find
you can't
your
make
compass.
exceptions.
No.
You can't make exceptions. You can't, because that's a slippery slope of going into a bad spot.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody knows that better than me, man. I made a lot of just exceptions for things. And I'm glad I'm turning my way around on it. And I think I have a responsibility now to talk about that to some degree. I'm not going to talk about everything. That's no. That's the end of everything. But the
mind
fact,
your business.
Yeah, but the fact is you can lose your moral way real quick, and it's not one thing.
No,
it's a lot of little things that you just say
they add up over time.
It's like a diet, and you're on this very like lean meats, vegetables, fruits diet, and it's good to you. Mm-hmm. It treats you well. It treats you really well. It makes you healthy.
Next thing it's Thanksgiving.
But then,
and
somebody...
you're like, I gotta have Thanksgiving dinner. It's
no,
my
but
favorite.
you're just at work and somebody tossed a candy bowl in front of you. And you got some candy bars. And you're like, it's just a little candy bar. And then you hit the candy bar up, and then you go home and you're like, well, I should just get that pint of ice cream, blah, blah, blah. I get a bag of chips, I'm already off the wagon, might as well go,
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you were to make a analogy of that to morality, it's very similar in that regard. I've learned more and more in the pursuit of the path I'm going in. Man, it's hard to be good.
It is.
It's so easy to be bad. Mm-hmm. It really is. It's
and
so
a lot of times
easy to be bad.
It feels really good to be bad.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Well, no, it feels good to be bad in a very small window of time.
Yeah, at that moment.
And that's what I've learned. Yeah. And even that wears away, and now you don't even know why you're doing what you're doing.
Right.
But I tell you what, as good as things feel doing the bad things, the good things outweigh that. Because doing a good deed just feels freaking great.
It does.
And it has a long-lasting effect. It's
you
not
mean
temporary.
Good deed doers?
So, with that being said, Waverly Hills Sanitarium next week.
Correct.
And as always, thanks for listening to the show. And, please rate, review, subscribe, follow, all of that stuff Jen mentioned earlier. It helps us out a ton.
Got
smash
topic?
that like button,
That will never be us.
Oh, I can't wait to say that when we get video going. And I'm going to just crank it out all the time. And I'm going to put it in your voice like you said it. Yeah. And then that's when they split up. That's when it was done.
That's all of a sudden Jen was like in jail.
Yeah.
And we were like, what happened?
Yeah. And Frank's got one eye. All right. Rule number 1.
No Ouija boards.
Number 2.
No dolls.
3.
No capes.
4.
No blood rituals.
Nope. 5.
No cults, satanic or otherwise.
Please not. 6.
No apathy. You need to act to help enact a positive change in this world. It's possible. You can do it.
Yeah.
I promise.
Oh, it's
Put your shopping cart away.
Yeah. Help somebody across the street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Buy coffee for the car behind you. Whatever.
Yeah. Ask how they're doing and then just listen. That should be a rule.
I mean, it is.
What's the next rule?
We just haven't gotten there yet. Don't engage with the black-eyed children, people, dogs, animals.
Don't listen to them. No.
Don't do it as bad.
If they want ketchup for their apple, you just slam the door. And if you don't know what that means, you need to listen
to the black-eyed
children episode. Yeah.
Correct.
And last but not least,
just listen.
Phew, we got it as a rule.
We did.
Excellent.
We do. So, we did go to Joanne's, guys. We did a recon.
We did, yeah.
And I overheard in Joanne's, well, I heard you. I just wasn't listening. I submit. And you didn't hear her.
Yeah.
It just made me think of my mom. Because there's so many times when she's looking right at you.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much like she's engaged.
Yeah,
No. Completely checked out.
Yeah.
You're like, did you not hear any of the words I just said?
No.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Fine. Whatever. I guess we're done here.
We are done here. And we're done here.
We are!
Yes.
Yes.
So have an amazing day, a lovely week.
And make good choices.
Take care, folks.